Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks here. I'm back with Will Hadcroft, the writer and massive Doctor Who fan, friend of the channel. And yeah, we're picking up the stories of Doctor Who's last comeback, all penned by Russell T Davies, Will, the man who already, I think we can safely say that the last time he brought it back, it really was one in the back of the net, wasn't it? Where I think, as we were saying the last time, where people who'd been really sort of aggressively dismissive of Doctor Who before were now all suddenly on board, weren't they? And how long did it take for you to get used to that?
That was, yeah. But I think sort of halfway through Christopher Eccleston's run, you know, I could see that they genuinely loved it, you know. People were coming in to work on a Monday morning and saying, "Did you watch Doctor Who on Saturday?" To one another, you know. I expect them to approach me because they know I'm a fan. But I'd hear conversations around the office and think, that's interesting. I find one of the things with it now is that I remember reading a lot at the time that Russell had based the tone of it really on City of Death. He felt that that was right? He felt that City of Death had just the right juxtaposition of drama and comedy. So it was that kind of Douglas Adamsy, Graham Williams vibe that he was after. He got Chris Eccleston to watch City of Death. So
I had no idea this happened, Will. This is all news to me.
Because I remember Chris Eccleston being interviewed, and he said, after my third bottle of wine, I decided, okay, I'm going to give it a go. and he watched City of Death because he wanted to see what Russell was aiming at, really.
Yeah.
And I remember it was either Jane Tranter or Julie Gardner very early on when whichever one it was, when she was interviewed, she said, "Oh, I already have a favourite episode. It's City of Death." and I thought, this is Russell is selling it to them on this basis of it being a bit of drama, bit of comedy. And when you watch it, that first episode, Rose,
now you see it.
When you think of the Autons, the Autons, like the wheelie bin situation, and when Mickey is copied, you know, back in the day, it was Spearhead from Space or Terror of the Autons. If someone was copied, they just had a slightly clammy look to the skin, didn't they?
Yeah.
And a bit of a zoned out look in their eyes. Whereas with the Mickey one, it looked comical, where he kept doing that stuttering thing, and his eyes rolling around in his head as he's trying to keep it together. You can see that if Graham Williams and Douglas Adams had done the Autons, this is how it would have been.
And also, Will, when I think of Tom and Lala running around the streets of Paris, and then think of Chris and Billy running around the streets of London, it's the same thing.
It's
the looks
there,
on their
isn't
face.
It? Yeah, it's there. Maybe Russell was also thinking, because I know they had the strikes on ITV and all of that, but 1979 was its biggest year, and a lot of people saw those episodes from that year, and if it started to go into any kind of a decline, it was after 1979, wasn't it? The original, a very, very gradual. It went up a bit with Peter and then down again. I'm not commenting on any of that because I love all of that stuff equally, really. But maybe Russell was thinking we've got to get the balance right to keep the casual viewers coming back, because the 16 million or whatever it was that watched City of Death Part 2 were not kids like me and you. It was pretty much everybody. Now, I know about the ITV strike. There was nothing on the other side, so everybody watched Doctor Who. But right across that season, and the previous season with the Key to Time, the viewing figures were pretty high. That latter period of the Tom Baker era was watched regularly by 9-10 million week after week after week. So I think perhaps Russell's thinking we have to get the tone of it like this. And although I would have much preferred, and I think Steve Noonan said this recently on one of his discussions with you, well, I would have much preferred it to have had a Hinchcliffe Holmes vibe. And I suppose with The Empty Child, it did. But I would have preferred it to have had that feel all the way through.
Consistently.
But I can see that Russell was going for the City of Death feeling to bring the casual viewers in and keep them there, and it worked. They did.
It was exactly right for the times, wasn't it? For the mid-noughties.
Yeah.
It was very well considered. All the ingredients were measured from the outside to perfection. I mean, now we know that they had just as much of a hard time making that series as everybody who'd worked on the show before, and they were sort of learning as they were going along. Lots of things went wrong, lots of things were cut, and it was far from a walk in the park. Behind the scenes, people didn't get on. I understand that people nearly came to blows on several occasions. It was very, very fraught, and yet the recommission for season 2, that had happened before season 1 had even aired.
Yeah,
and so it's longer term position back in the schedules. If nothing else, that was guaranteed. So when did you find out that it wasn't just back for the one season, that it was back for longer, that it was safe to invest in it again?
It's hard to be sure, because I have the problem now, all these years on, superimposing things we knew later onto the past. So I don't know what I'm remembering, but I knew it was going to come back for a second year. I suppose it was when they announced that David Tennant would be taking it over, because that was announced sort of midway through, wasn't it? The first series.
Yes,
David Tennant would be taking it over. So I knew then there was going to be a second series.
I think it was before the midpoint. It was really quite soon, because they'd got the tabloids at the same time that they'd found out that Chris wasn't going to be around for very long. They'd got David's name pretty much in the same information. And sure enough, Tennant had already been cast by the time he'd recorded the narration for that special edition, the opening edition of Doctor Who Confidential. By the time
fascinating, that isn't it?
The next Doctor, yeah.
In retrospect, the fact that he voices that special confidential thing that comes on before Rose, that is poetic. Isn't it?
Were you aware of David Tennant before he took the role? Was this an actor? Because you spoke before on the previous show how you were really aware and invested in Chris Eccleston because he went to the same school as you. But David Tennant's a different prospect, isn't he? He came from Scotland, and a very different kind of actor, a younger actor by about 10 years, isn't
he? He was in a series called Blackpool. Do you remember that?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
It had David Morrissey in it.
Sarah Parish,
Sarah Parish, yeah, and it had similar to kind of what used to go on in Dennis Potter things, where they'd suddenly burst into song and lip sync to a famous in a scene.
Oh, is that what it was like?
They would lip sync into a popular song, but the lyrics would be as though they were having a conversation about the situation they're in the drama.
Oh, okay.
Very, very cleverly done. Very cleverly done. And there's a sequence where he runs across the road in front of the Doctor Who exhibition of the early 2000s. And at the time, I had heard he was a Doctor Who fan. So when I saw him run across the road, Doctor Who Experience it was called, wasn't it? The second one. Not the one on the corner that I love so much. And he actually runs across the road in a scene with the Doctor Who Experience at the back. So I knew about him from that, and I knew about him from Casanova, although I never watched Casanova. I'd seen all the publicity for it. I'd seen him on the cover of the Radio Times with his blue contact lenses in.
See, that's the one that I did watch. I didn't see Blackpool, but I did watch Casanova, largely on the strength of Russell T Davies, because I'd liked all of his earlier work, everything that I'd seen. I've since gone back and watched. I'm pretty sure I've seen everything he's ever done, and so that's why I watched it. Nothing to do with David Tennant. It was
I couldn't imagine what he would do with it, unlike Christopher Eccleston. Whereas I thought, well, we know what Christopher Eccleston does, With David, I thought, well, this is a blank canvas. I've got no idea how they'll go with this. So I just waited, and much as we did in the old days, when we didn't know anything about the new Doctor Who, apart from Peter Davison, we didn't know what they'd been in before or what they were like. So it was always a surprise when a new Doctor Who came along, and just to find out what they're like as you're watching it. And it was like that with David.
One would have thought that technically a new series to a lot of the audience. This was a brand new show that they'd never seen before. You know, Sarah Graham, she's often said how that it was pretty much like that for her. There was a lot of people out there that to them this was a box fresh show, and they got into it. They liked the first couple, and then they find out the lead actor's going and all these things. So it's surprising in some ways that the wheels didn't come off this thing pretty much right away, but the audience turned up again, didn't they? They were really willing to give Tennant a chance in this role, and there seemed to be no downtime whatsoever in this. And as soon as he started playing it from the Christmas Invasion onwards, it was almost like, well, business as usual. There was maybe a tiny blip where people were wondering, and there was people who liked the previous guy a bit more, but just in time on a Doctor Who fashion. But generally speaking, from that point on, the profile of the show, the profile of Tennant himself, and everybody who they would cast into it in regular roles just built and built and built.
Oh, it went through the roof, didn't it?
TV juggernaut. It was absolutely unstoppable. It was slaying programs that had been around for a few years. Anything they put opposite Doctor Who just got destroyed in the ratings, didn't it? Do you remember that feeling?
It was lovely to be a fan of something that's so popular, you know. Yeah. In the old days of Tom Baker, you knew that whatever they put on ITV wouldn't stand a chance, you know. On Type 40 Live recently, Ian said that he wasn't
You haven't got to listen to what Ian says.
He wasn't keen on the fact that David Tennant's Doctor didn't really come in until the last 15 minutes. I can see why he thinks that now, because it's Doctor Who, where is the Doctor? But in retrospect, thinking back to what you're saying about why did the wheels not come off when Eccleston left, I think the way Russell handled it with the Christmas Invasion was absolutely bang on, because he focused on the characters who were still there. He focused on Rose, Jackie, Mickey.
To reassure the viewer, the casual, not us, because he knew we'd be there anyway, but to reassure the casuals who may have been tempted to drift off it.
Yeah, he brought back the Penelope Wilton character, Harriet, which is someone that everybody watching the earlier ones would recognise. That scene where Rose suddenly bursts into tears and says to her mother, "He's left me, Mum, he's left me." Even though she's seen him transform and be renewed. Yeah. As far as she's concerned, this new guy with the foppish hair and you know, this bogus Southern accent, you know, is not the same guy. And I thought that was a brilliant scene, that all the kids watching who are thinking, my Doctor Who's gone, you know. I remember struggling so much after Tom Baker left, and being excited by we're going to get a new Doctor Who, and then when he arrived, thinking I want Tom Baker back.
But when we've spoken before, we've touched on the fortunes of the show, sort of ebbing and flowing, rather, and how when it came back to popularity, you've got that sort of reversal of fortunes where people who actively expressed their distaste for Doctor Who all of a sudden couldn't bear to miss it. That's one thing to get used to, but on screen, we've got a case where, as you say, in that scene that you've just described, Rose, the character, is displaying a deep emotional response.
Yeah.
Whereas in the classic series,
isn't it? Grief.
It is. It absolutely is. But in the classic series, despite the fact that it had a greater runtime over the stories, you know, generally they were put the 4 parts together of the average story, you got a feature-length thing. They never took the time to go there with certainly a supporting character, let alone a regular character. Did you find that jarring in any way, that all of a sudden Doctor Who could go places that it hadn't, not that it hadn't dared before, but that simply wasn't in his remit before?
It was refreshing. The fact that, because, you know, if you watch Planet of the Spiders, you know, John Pertwee says, you know, a tear, Sarah Jane, and then he goes.
It's just a dash.
And then
of emotion,
it's explained that his cells will be regenerated and he will literally become a new man. And they kind of planted the seeds earlier on, haven't they, with Campo and Shoji and all of that for the audience, really. This is what's going to happen at the end. But when we get into Robot, Sarah just accepts it. We know the Brigadier does, because he's seen it before. But for Sarah to just, oh, this is what he is now. Right, okay.
I suppose nothing trumped, did it, in the classic show, the need to power further adventure. And the only time that they ever stopped and did that and examined it a little more closely, you could say that it was met with mixed responses, both Castrovalva and particularly the twin dilemma, where they go into it in some psychological way. You know, people did reject that. People didn't want to go. People wanted to be swept up. The instincts were right in the classic show that the audience did want to be swept up in adventure. But by the time the new series was on, and you've got that established 45-minute format, that American model of format that Buffy the Vampire Slayer and all those other shows had used so deftly. Doctor Who wasn't breaking any molds in that respect internationally, but it was very boldly using that runtime to take us to those places that it hadn't stopped to before. Because a lot of fans dismissed even that moment you're talking about with Rose there as soapy. Any moment where any characters stand still for longer than 10 seconds in a kitchen or on a staircase or a balcony, it's soap. They've gone soap. I mean, that sort of talk always really frustrated me, Will, because I just never felt that way at all. But I suppose what they're picking up on is subliminally even is the fact that it's so unlike the language and the look and the pace of the classic show. It wasn't in the remit then to do that. It was adventure. What's the next corridor we're going to walk or run down?
Yeah, the emotional side of it.
In our past conversations, we've talked a little about how growing up watching Doctor Who, the classic show, though, and that mode of storytelling, how reassuring that was. It didn't look or feel like anything else on TV. You didn't feel that the new format, the new model, and these new quotas of emotion and a kind of character-led stories rather than adventure-led stories mixed in. You didn't feel that was a betrayal of the format at all, or more to the point, you didn't find that conflicted with your own nature. Because we've also spoken before, haven't we, about living as somebody who's on the spectrum and how we relate to our entertainment. You didn't find that compromising in any way?
I didn't. No, I didn't. I welcome the fact that it was more emotional. I didn't want it becoming too emotional, you know. But if somebody dies, a character who's observed it should see it. If a character loses someone they love, they should feel it. That stuff where the Doctor fixes Rose's phone so she can phone her mother up. I mean, I love that juxtaposition of being, you know, on platform 1 at the end of the world. And then she's talking to her mum and she's throwing some washing in the washing machine, you know. Because you would be thinking about what you'd left behind, wouldn't you? There's even a scene, I think, in End of the World where she says, "My God, I'm 5 billion years in the future," and she suddenly realized, and I've gone off with this bloke I don't even know, and it sort of hits her. That's something you wouldn't get in the old series either. That they're running off with someone they've only just met. They're traveling through space and time in this machine. They've got no idea whether he's, you know, benevolent. Or whether he's got an ulterior motive. They don't know if he's a kind-hearted man, as he seems to be, helping people, or if he's a crook on the run. Yeah, they don't know anything about him. But it's never acknowledged. Oh, who is this person that I've abandoned my world and my family for? Whereas in the modern series, it is addressed, and I welcome that when they first did it.
And why do you think that era in the show was so successful? Was it simply the fact that it reeks of quality because of moments like that, because of depth of character? It's simply been a quality production, or was it simply the right show at the right time? What do you think created that storm around Doctor Who in the mid-noughties?
I think it was fresh. Obviously, Doctor Who itself had not been around for a long time. It was something from way back that had now come back. But it was also for, you know, people had never heard of it. They were aiming it at people who had never heard of it. We got to the stage where people didn't know what a Dalek was anymore, you know.
Weird, isn't it?
I used to say in the office, I'd say, you know, if you go in a room that looks larger inside than that, you go, oh, it's a bit like a TARDIS, isn't it? And then if somebody says, what's a TARDIS? You think, my word, have we come to that? So when it came back, boom, there it is. And it was new, it was fresh, it was exciting. It had a heart. It had characters that you could engage with. It drew you in. And that's all you want for a TV show, isn't it? You want it to engage you. And that's what it did. And it was imaginative and clever. And it really did. When we got to Chris Eccleston's Regeneration, a good friend of mine told me that his 2 teenage daughters, who were sort of, well, the eldest one was mid-teens and the youngest one a bit sort of 12-ish or something, getting on to 13. They did what everybody previously has done, because they knew a bit of old Doctor Who because they know me. But when Chris Eccleston did his big thing, off he goes. Yeah. And then David turns up at the end and says, new teeth, that's weird. Where was I? Barcelona, and does that grin at the end. He said to me, as the music was going, the credits are going up, they're going, right, that's it. This is rubbish. This isn't Doctor Who. It's rubbish. We're not coming back to watch this again. That's it. We're done.
We're out.
And then by the end of the Christmas Invasion, which is all testament to David Tennant's acting, just those last 15 minutes of the Christmas Invasion, he'd sold it to them that he was the Doctor. And of course, they were on board then for the rest of it. So even though earlier on we spoke about, you know, weren't they worried that the wheels would come off this thing with Chris leaving so early? In the end, it kind of brought them into the whole Doctor Who thing. This is what happens in Doctor Who. So that obviously sets the template for later on when David would leave. So in a way, it did the new fans a favour that the lead actors come and go in this thing, you know, but the programme itself continues.
What goes around comes around. I hope you're going to come back another time after those specials and tell us a bit of what you thought about that, and maybe pick up the story with some more of your memories from back in the early days of the new series too. So put some more pieces of this puzzle together.
Yeah, I would love to.
Fabulous stuff. This is Type 40 for Whovember. Let us know what you think of all of this, the various things that we've picked up on about David Tennant's and Christopher Eccleston's time with the show, and that original Russell T Davies era. Did you get tired of the season arcs and the bad wolves and all the potents and he will knock 4 times? Are you dreading all that stuff coming back, that mode of storytelling? Or do you think, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Happy for it to come back if it means that the spell still works on the all-important normies out there, because, of course, there's millions of them. There's only tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of us. We'll see how it goes. Let us know in the comments section. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the cloister bell to get all the notifications about more from us, from Whovember, and the live streams and the podcasts. Thanks for coming on again, Will. People can find you on Twitter. You're still on Twitter, aren't you?
I am just about.
You're still Xing? You're an X-man?
I'm still at Hadcroft Will.
There you go.
Somebody in China hacked my original one, so I've had to go back to front now. So it's Hadcroft Will. And I'm on Facebook as Will Hadcroft. So you'll find me one way or another.
There you go. Go and find Will and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think of all this. We'll see you on the next one. Type 40 for Whovember.